We are filming this a little late into April, and it is also my second time filming this wrap up. But let's talk about everything that I read in March. We're going to go rapid fire. It's too many books. Let's do it. Hello, welcome back. I read too many books in March, so let's just talk about them. We'll start with my Storygraph stats like normal, and then we will go into all the books I read and just briefly as I can, talk about them. Let's do it. I read 28 books
I read 28 books.
in March. Now, that is too many books, but that's what I read. That's what happened. It's technically 29. And honestly, if I had known that I was that close to 30, I might have actually attempted to read 30 books, but no, I have problems. So that equates to 8,904 pages in March, which is quite a lot. My moods were normal for me. Emotional, dark, reflective, sad. Those are my tops. That's what's always there. I'm a sad bitch. Let's move on. Pace, medium, whatever that means. I don't know what that means. Graph looks vaguely the same every month. Page count, this is how I read 28 books, 29 if you count Lord of the Rings, is that over half of them were under 300 pages. Don't ask me how. Don't ask me why. They just were. Okay? This is what happened. I did read some nonfiction this month, which is a little shocking. I feel like I read more this month than I normally do. Or maybe that's just what it feels like. And then my genres are pretty similar, with literary being up on top, a lot of queer lit, all of that fun stuff. But then we have some things that snuck in, like short stories and horror. And I'm kind of digging that little addition to my reading. And my average ratings across all books that I read was 3.64. It was a fine month in terms of how much I enjoyed my reading. There were several duds, though, which we'll get into when we go through the books themselves. So let's get that teed up and away we go. We're going to start here at like one of the first books I read this month. One of the first books I read in March, which is Dead Silence by S.A. Barnes. I've had this as an arc for quite a while from Torrent Nightfire, and I finally read it. And I am kind of mid on this. I loved the beginning creepy body horror, ghost ship, limbs, how did everybody die mystery aspect of it. But then as the mystery was being solved and revealed, I was less into it. But I think some of this is the fault of the audiobook. I did get warned not to listen to it, but I was already well into it. And the audiobook narrator for this is the same audiobook narrator for The Beautiful, that Renee Ahdieh series. And it is possibly one of the worst narrations I've ever when I see that I need to remember this name so that when I see it, don't I just don't listen to books narrated by them. For you guys, somebody out there might enjoy their narrations. I hate them. It's terrible. It ruined the experience. I think I could have liked this more, but alas, I was already well into it, and there we were. It was my one of my listening books for driving to work, my commuter books, and that there wasn't much I was going to do at that point. It was mid. Nora Roberts' The Choice, which is the third book in the Dragon Heart Legacy, and I'm glad that I tried Nora Roberts. I'm glad that I tried Nora Roberts with fantasy. She is very commercial. I understand why she's successful. Her writing is accessible and fine, but this series is not for me. It was trying to give like social commentary, be a contemporary, be a fantasy, be a romance, be like feminist lit. It was trying to be too many things, and it honestly didn't need to be a whole trilogy. It could have been one on the longer side book. I just was so bored by the time I got to the third book, and I kept thinking, "Oh, are we going to be resolved?" And we weren't. So it is not for me. I think other people really like this. If I want fantasy, I don't want this kind of fantasy. But if it gets people into the genre and gets them to try other things, then I think it's valuable, and okay, cool, great. But yeah, Nora Roberts, she may be a queen on clapping back on Twitter, but she is not the author. For me, Burial Rites by Hannah Kent was our TBR Lowdown Patreon book club pick. our first TBR Lowdown Patreon book club pick. And this book was phenomenal. It's set in Iceland. It's about a woman who's awaiting execution, and she gets taken out of like her prison and is brought to this town where she actually used to live, and she's living with these people who are at first very afraid of her because she's a murderess, and then slowly they begin to empathize with her, you begin to empathize with her, you begin to see her story and her life and what led her to maybe not murder this her like master. She lived and worked in this house, and it's phenomenal. It was amazing, and it made me even more excited to go to Iceland, which we are supposed to be doing this year. We've been trying to go to Iceland for 3 years, 3 or 4 years running now, and nothing is standing in our way short of like something absolutely horrendous. So we are going, and I am very excited to go because the scenery in this, the town, like beautiful, 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 beautiful writing. I don't even know what I'm saying anymore. I'm just so wrapped up in my excitement about going to Iceland that I can't even talk about this book. It's really well written. I very much enjoyed it, and I would like to read more from Hannah Kent. The Book Eaters by Sun Yi Dean. I have a review already on the channel for this. Won't go into much detail. I wasn't in love with this book. I was expecting more. It was a little bit of a mess, but it also ended without having everything wrapped up neatly. And there is supposed to be a second book allegedly. So I will be reading the second book because I kind of would like to see if it gets better and if having like things wrapped up makes the book as a whole or the series as a whole make sense. I don't know how many books she plans to have in this. I don't know if it's just meant to be a duology, but I'm excited. Next up is Liberation Day by George Saunders. This was for the Booktube Prize. It's a collection of short stories. There's a lot of short stories in this wrap up. I enjoyed this collection overall. I don't know how to judge a collection of short stories because some of them were bangers and some of them were just fine. But in general, I did enjoy this. I was pleased while reading it. I liked this more than Lincoln in the Bardo, so maybe I won't give up on Saunders just yet, but I'm going to still be a little wary of him. Foster by Claire Keegan. I loved this book. I loved her other book that I read. I just like her writing. I like the way she captures like small stories, small moments, small things between people in Ireland, and I would be curious to see what she would do with a longer form book. I think that she could be very good in longer form and more people. I mean, I know a lot of people really like Foster and small things like these, but I feel like there are people that criticize it for being like too short, too like doesn't do enough, all these other things. Like it was kind of like meh at the end. But I find that she plays with my emotions really well, and I get really invested in these characters. She builds characters that I really like. And I also have this sense of foreboding with Foster in particular, is waiting for something absolutely horrendous to occur. I cried at the end. So like I love Claire Keegan and I will read whatever she writes, but I would be very interested to see her write something a little bit longer. Galatea by Madeline Miller was okay. This is technically itself a short story, but I guess we're counting it as a book. It's sort of a feminist retelling of the Pygmalion's statue, Galatea. And she's been institutionalized for being like crazy. And it talks a lot about how women have this history of being institutionalized for being like crazy or nuts or whatever, hysterical, all the fun stuff. And the commentary it was making, I liked, but I think my problem is I kind of wish that this story in particular was not done in 80 pages and was done in a longer form, and I could have gotten a lot more invested in all of the whole backstory of how we got to this point, to everything. I wanted more from it, and it was ultimately disappointing because it's such a, I feel like Madeline Miller was trying to say a lot, and she does say it, but she could have said it better in longer form. I just have a feeling that this is something that she probably wrote for herself or for a small audience, and then because of the success of like Circe and the Song of Achilles, it got published and is now standing on its own. And it needs more. I would love to see if she tackled that in longer form. Demon Copperhead by Barbara Solver. This was again for the Booktube Prize, and I am not a fan of this. I think that if you want a book that talks about the opioid epidemic in America, for me personally, go to Empire of Pain. I think that it is more impactful and more informative than this fictionalized narrative is. And I just found it overall to be a tedious read, and I have the feeling I'm in the minority here because everyone seems to like Demon Copperhead, but I honestly just it's not my kind of book, and I very much did not enjoy this experience. But I guess I'm wrong in that opinion because I think a lot of people really do like this. 100 Years of Solitude by Gabriel Garcia Marquez is a reread. I read this in my early 20s, and I reread it. It's funny how much you forget and it's funny how much you remember. This is the kind of book that really needs to be reread multiple times. There's so much that goes on it. There's so much that's fantastical in this magical realism that is so deadpan and you just have to accept it. And I like South American magical realism. That's probably because it's my first experience with magical realism, so I do have a fondness for it. But I really enjoyed rereading this. I enjoyed picking up on new things in this reread, and this may need to be something that gets brought into my regular sort of cycle of rereading of books because there's just so much to pick up on each time you read it. I was trying to make a review because I really want a review to stand alone on this channel about 100 Years of Solitude, but I just don't think that after two reads, it is enough for me to do a review that gives it justice because there's so much that Marquez is talking about in this. I feel like this is the kind of thing that you could dissect for a lifetime and you could kind of talk about forever over a cup of coffee with a friend. So phenomenal book. If you like classics, especially like more modern classics, I and you haven't read it yet, I say read it because I think it's important to have that in your repertoire. If you absolutely hate magical realism and you don't like classics, don't read this book. It's not gonna be the end of the world if you don't. But I think it's phenomenal. And for anybody who's interested in it, I think it's an important read. One Moonlight Night by Care Dog Pritchard is a book I read at the behest of Katie Books. And I have a standalone review of this. So you can check that out on the channel. And I started off kind of being a little bored with this book. And then it did end with enough of like a little twist, a little to hook me. I ultimately really love this book. I think it's a really interesting snapshot of Wales and Wales in a specific time and an interesting introduction into Welsh literature as a whole. And I would look forward to more recommendations from Gady of books that I need to read. He did give me one that I do need to find, which looks like it's like a mystery thriller kind of thing. So, One Moonlight Night was very, very good. I encourage you to read it. It is very bleak and dark, but done kind of like 100 Years of Solitude with the deadpanness. But that deadpan in this is done because our narrator, for the most part, is a child, and so you have a child's very superficial, almost emotional understanding of the things that they're seeing in this town, and yeah, it's very interesting. I did enjoy it. On the flip side, Olivia Blake's Alone with You in the Ether, which also has its own review on the channel, I did not ultimately end up enjoying this. And so I started out being annoyed the same reason I was annoyed with Atlas 6 with Olivia Blake's writing and the like use it just feels like pseudo intellectualism, which is kind of mean. It feels like I'm insulting her, but I'm not. But it feels try hard in terms of the way she chooses to use language and it doesn't feel natural. I feel like it almost feels like she hasn't found her voice yet. She did create this really beautiful romantic tension in the story. So I forgot about those early feelings and I was really swept up in the romance of this story until I wasn't, because then our characters started to do things that I don't agree with. And you can watch that review to get more information on like kind of how I felt in general. But overall, this ended up disappointing me, especially because I thought I was going to finally have an Olivia Blake that I enjoyed, and it just disappointed me. And I don't think I'm going to read from her anymore unless for some reason somebody convinces me that some book has m- greatly improved and like the writing has improved and I should try her again. I am abandoning this author, I think, for from now on. This book, however, was phenomenal, and this is Neems by Satya Naspini. Naspini. I don't know. This is the chicken book, and this book is just like a nice gossip. Basically, the book is this older woman who loses her husband and then eventually develops this like relationship with her chicken, not in like a weird way, but she like kind of has this weird codependent relationship with the chicken. And the chicken goes in the house one day and is like stunned and watching TV and like won't move and is like hypnotized by the TV. So she calls this doctor and is talking to him on the phone. And the story from that point is that's the setup. And then the rest of the story is just her on the phone with this guy. And you're getting like all the dirt from like decades between him, her husband, his wife, the neighbor upstairs. It is messy, it is gossipy, and I love it. It was such a good book. Absolutely love it. This was my Patreon pick from March, which is Age of Feist by Dipti Kapoor. And I we I think we went into this with really high hopes because I think so many people have talked about how much they love it. I think that that ended up doing us a bit of a disservice because though this book is very good, I think it didn't live up to the hype in our heads. But I don't want that to take away from the overall the quality of the book. I think the book was very well written. I think that it's a moving portrayal of the corruption within India, which the more I read stories set in India, the more I realize I don't understand the politics in that particular region. So it's a really interesting and accessible and well done and moving portrayal of a very specific section of kind of the corruption and what's going on with these like basically like gangs, really powerful families that can do all these things. Sometimes I felt like this was a little long. Some of the point of views were so hard to be in because they were so violent that it I wanted out of that character's head. Ajay was absolutely the most one of the most sympathetic characters. Sunny frustrated me to no end as the spoiled child. Anytime I started to like have sympathy for him and potentially start to like him, he did something incredibly stupid. He really frustrated me. So I think that this book is better than perhaps I felt at the time, and that was kind of my own fault for building it up in my head. But I really do think that this is something that if you want more on the region and the politics, if you want more, if you like books about like really messy people, I think that this was really great. Maps of Our Spectacular Body by Maddie Mortimer was the Read the Booker with Dee Dee Reed's book for the month of March, and I ended up really loving this. I do think that it has flaws. I think that sometimes the weird use of form wasn't strictly necessary. I think that it was a little bit convoluted in areas, but sometimes I think it was necessary to be convoluted, and other times I think it was just being convoluted to be convoluted. But I loved the fact that cancer had its a voice in this story. If you've been watching this channel, you will know that I lost a friend who's about the age of the character in this story, and was a mom. What this book for me, my takeaway was what it gave me was an insight into what my friend, uh, my loved ones, what other people in my life who've had cancer and passed, the things that they weren't telling us, the fragmented worries and thoughts that they had. It was kind of a way to connect and understand something that you will only understand if you experience it. I thought it was beautifully done. I loved it. I can't believe that Maddie Mortimer is like super young and was super young when she wrote this. Yeah, I think for the people that this book is for, you're going to love it. I don't know if everybody's going to, but like if you start reading this and it strikes a chord, I think you're going to love it. On the other hand, A System So Magnificent It's Blinding by Amanda Svensson. This is one of the international longlist books that I read. I think it's the first one I read, other than Boulder, which I read previously. And no, just skip this book. It started off really promising and then just fell apart and had no business being as long as it was. It literally could have been solved with a DNA test. It was overly like dramatic and like it was no, it just pass. Uh, The Minuscule Mansion of My Room Alone, however, by Audrey Burgess is phenomenal. Such a great, like, heartwarming read. I loved it. It's magical realism, it's a romance. You have this lady who you have this girl who has this huge online presence but is essentially agoraphobic. She basically is famous online for having this dollhouse that she redoes the rooms for and like posts about it online, and people like are obsessed with the dollhouse. And she never really leaves her house because she got in a car accident when she was very young. There's all this stuff going on with her family, and whatever. So stuff's going on. She has to raise some money. She does this thing, and somehow she gets in contact with this guy who you find out, and this isn't a terribly big spoiler, it comes out pretty early in the book, but he's basically living in a parallel house to the minuscule mansion, her dollhouse, and that just sparks this whole story, and it's so much fun, and it's whimsical and it's wonderful, and I loved this book, and I haven't seen enough people talking about it. So if you want a heartwarming book, if you're like going on vacation and you're going to sit around a pool, read this book. I think it's going to be, I loved it. I thought it was just great. I am still reading Heaven's Official's Blessing. I did start this. I keep getting distracted with other things, but I am working through it. A commenter suggested that I try it. I am enjoying it so far, but this first book, there's a lot of explaining of this world and like the gods and how everything works, and I'm kind of bogged down in all that. But the writing is kind of funny, and I'm enjoying it. I'm enjoying it. More thoughts to come on that. Freshwater by Akwaeke Emezi I talked about in my TBR video for April, but love this fantastic portrayal of mental illness. I loved I, the use of collective voice. I loved the non-Western narrative structure, and it was so good, so good. Akwaeke Emezi cannot do wrong, in my opinion. The Rabbit Hutch by Tess Gunty was another Booktube Prize book. This is pretty mid for me because every few stories I went like up and down. This is a kind of a collection of different narratives that string together to tell the story of this town that's like falling apart. Like I cared for some and I didn't care for others, and it just I felt like I just did this the whole time. So it's pretty mid for me. Like it's fine. I know some people really loved it. I know some people really hated it. I like literally it honestly depended on our point of view whether I liked it or not. It does have a crazy ending though. Pyre is the other long list book for IB that I have read so far. Otherwise, we are reading them one a month or for a year with TBR Lowdown on our Discord. So if you want to join the Discord, links in on our website, which is down below. But I really liked Pyre, and this is our book for April. I'm very curious to see the discussion on this because I feel like I keep hearing people not like this book, and I'm really curious to hear all the reasons why all the people didn't like this book. But I really liked it. I thought again it gave me another snapshot into a region that I don't know a lot about the politics or their customs or society, especially like kind of now. The look at the caste system, I get some of the criticisms about needing more detail. Perhaps it was too short, perhaps it was too surface level, but I kind of liked it as a kind of intro into some themes and topics and discussions that are really important to have and could maybe make you dig deeper and find other books. If anybody has any other books that do dig deeper into the things that are discussed in Pyre, I would absolutely love to hear those. The Seep by Chana Porter is so good. Again, talked about this in my TBR video. I wrapped this up a little bit. I read this for the Trans Rights Readathon in March, and this is a little sci-fi novella that is phenomenal. Please read it. Super short. You will love it. It's very good. Same with The Prettiest Star by Carter Sickles. This is about a young man in the 80s, the late 80s, going home from New York City to his small town in Ohio. He is gay, he has AIDS, and it is such a gut wrenching portrayal of the AIDS epidemic and how it hurt people. It didn't just kill people, but the way, the Reagan administration handled this and the way people treated people who had AIDS, and just it is gut wrenching and so good and so beautiful. And I need to hunt down a copy for the shelves because I'm mad that I don't have a physical copy. And if Naomi, when you read this, if you're watching this, when you if you read this book, I will reread it with you because I do really want to get a physical copy and mark it up because some of it is just it's such a good read. Say Nothing, the true story, a true story of murder and memory in Northern Ireland by Patrick Radden Keefe. Naomi, my podcast co-host, recommended that I read this to get background information before I read Trespasses. I think it's by Louise Kennedy and a few other books that are set during the Troubles that have been coming out and I seem to be gravitating towards to get some of that background because I don't think that I've ever truly understood exactly what was going on in Northern Ireland. Like it's kind of like little snippets and bits of information, but not like a whole well thought out like explanation of kind of what was going on and I guess what possibly could be still under the surface. So really good book to do that. I did enjoy Say Nothing. I also just really enjoy Patrick Radden Keefe. I feel like he writes good like narrative sort of nonfiction that is easy to follow and very informative, and I do enjoy it. The Spight House by Johnny Compton, horror book that has like the haunted house theme plus a little bit of like pet cemetery. The ghosts are actually ghosts. I love it. I do like a book where you think it might be paranormal, but it's not. It's just stuff going on in your head. But I do love a book that actually like digs into paranormal activity. And this does. There's a lot of commentary on like America and race and all kinds of other things. And I love this book. It's creepy. It's well done. It's great. Our Missing Hearts by Celeste Ng. This is another book I read for a Booktube Prize, and I was really dreading this book because for some reason I just thought it was going to be like super commercial and kind of boring and like not something I normally read. And I didn't realize that this is actually literary sci-fi and was surprisingly very good in my humble opinion. I really enjoyed this. It's a look at a dystopian world or future where Asian Americans are essentially at threat of being almost disappeared if they don't toe the line. There's this incredibly fascist American rhetoric that's going on. At times, it's very difficult to read because it reads a little too uh, possibly uh, happening in this world. Yeah, it was surprisingly good. I really enjoyed this, and maybe I need to not judge certain books before I read them. This was harder hitting than I thought and very good. 19 Claws and a Blackbird by Augustina Basterica. I need Jesus here to fix my pronunciation, but this is the same author that wrote Tenders of Flesh. This is her collection of short stories that's coming out later this year. I'll put a timestamp, a pub date on the bottom, but Scribner did send me over an arc, and had to read it. I've been so excited for more from this author. I'm absolutely loving female authors, especially like more contemporary ones coming out of Argentina. I feel like they are phenomenal. I love South American writing in general. These women are just throwing out bangers, in my humble opinion. So I love these. They're dark and twisted and feminist and there's a little bit of body horror, and I love them. Some of them have stuck with me. It's just so good. It's so good. I cannot wait for this to come out and for more people to be talking about it. Again, it's a short story collection, so this is not what I normally read, but I am loving these short stories. Mm, so happy, so good. James Baldwin's The Fire Next Time. I am slowly collecting and reading Baldwin's works. I honestly had no idea who James Baldwin even was until maybe a handful of years ago. And since then, it's just been this really eye opening experience seeing him talk in old news clips, reading some of his works, or getting, like snippets of his works. And this collection, this essay is a phenomenal essay looking at life growing up in Harlem in like post-war America and the challenges and the things that are going on and like the Black Panther movement and like Black Islam and race in America. And it's so and religion and how that ties into it. It's a phenomenal essay. I do need to read it more. Lots of annotations going on in my copy, and I just find his writing. It's James Baldwin needs to be on everybody's like, you have to read these books before you die list. Just like pick a bunch. read them. And oh, so good. My Pen is the Wing of a Bird was on our TBR Lowdown reading list for the year. It's our March pick, and this collection of short stories was amazing, and more people need to talk about these. Or these are stories from 18 Afghan women. Some of the stories are what you would expect. They are heartbreaking and upsetting and just terrible stories about all the crimes that kind of just get committed against women. But then there are also these kind of hopeful moments within family units, that there's beauty and trouble, and there's so much human experience in these stories. They're phenomenal. They're beautiful. I cannot wait for our discussion of this. We'll be doing this at the end of April, beginning of June. And I just really need more people to read this collection. I know a lot of people don't like short stories, but I think one of the most important things about books and literature is that they can help you understand the world around you, and they can give voice to people that otherwise would be voiceless. And this collection is so good, and I need more people to read it. I did read The Two Towers, which is book 2 of Lord of the Rings. I enjoyed this so much more than book 1. I honestly found that a little shocking, because usually in a trilogy, book two is the disappointing read, not book 1. Book 2 is usually the disappointing read, so it was nice to actually love it and be really excited for book 3, which I'll be reading in April, alongside all the books that I'm reading for Transgirl April. And I'm really, really shocked that I'm enjoying it as much as I am at this point in book 2. I'm really enjoying Lord of the Rings a lot more. When I'm done, I'm gonna be happy to have this in like my back pocket. Like, I've read Lord of the Rings now. I know that's not like that huge of an accomplishment, but it feels like I will understand fantasy better now. I don't know. It just feels good. I'm happy. And also, I love Gollum. I know that he's going to betray me. I know bad things are going to happen, but I love Gollum. I love Gollum. And then finally, we have Cursed Cocktails by S.L. Rowland. I I have a review already on the channel for this, and I did not like this book, but it was a really helpful tool in understanding what I'm looking for in cozy fantasy. This is a cozy queer fantasy that was fine, but is not for me. It seems like a lot of people really liked this book, but I was not one of those people. It was a little tedious for me. But you can watch that review if you want more information. But yeah, that's everything I read in the month of March, and I'm super excited to tell you guys about the things that I'm reading in April, because I've already read a bunch of stuff in April for Transgirl April, and it has all been so good. I'm starting a new job tomorrow as of filming, so I don't know where I'm going to plop in little reviews of some of the books that I've already read for Transgirl April, because I do want to kind of give them their own little moment. I don't know if some of them might be shorts, some of them might be longer form videos, but oh, there's been so many good things being read for that, along with other stuff that I'm reading. But yeah, I'd love to know what you really loved from me reading or really hated from me reading down below. I'd love to know your thoughts on any of these if you've read them. Otherwise, thank you for watching. Like and subscribe, and I'll see you in my next video, whatever it may be, because it's my channel and I can do whatever I want. Bye.
So just sit with me, talking to the night until the morning, building chemistry. I don't think I ever wanna go come closer next to me. Trying to find another way to say this, but I think